Hello everybody, Andrew Casey at Hypersanity Audiobooks, and today we're talking about Ghostbusters, the novelisation. Now within this new channel we're talking about audiobooks specifically. I have also done some other book reviews on Hypersanity books and case study videos. There is a bit of a different thing that we have within the channel there, and I also have the other channel, Hypersanity Books for Kids. But as a disclaimer in today's video, this video is not for children. The subject matter is not for children. There are things within the Ghostbusters novelisation that I found disturbing and shocking. Otherwise, I just want to disclaim, this video that I'm doing today is not for children and there are subject matters that need to be discussed. Otherwise, let's get into it. Number 1. Richard Mueller. Richard Mueller wrote a lot of episodes of The Real Ghostbusters and a few of the more heartwarming, meaningful episodes of Extreme Ghostbusters that touched on a lot of the harder subject matter, especially when it came to family. So I found with the author of this book, he has gone off the original source material, being the original scripts and ideas, and then created this book from here, the novelisation of the movie. And there are a lot of differences that are quite vast, and some things are still familiar with what we have with the movie that we all know. However, there are some things that just are not going to fit within the story, and I think the novelisation is interesting because we're looking at what could have been or what shouldn't have been. Number 2, co-writers. I've been talking about this subject matter more frequently about co-authors and co-writing, and I believe to some of the old interviews that I've seen that Dan Aykroyd created about 90% of what Ghostbusters is and what we know with the original scripts. And then Harold Ramis took on some of the ideas to help fill in the gaps. And that's something to think about with a lot of your writing or different creations. You can do a majority of the workload, and sometimes you just need someone else with a lot of experience to help fill the gaps. And Ghostbusters is no stranger to this. Number 3, 2 lots of Ghostbusters. That was something that was confusing in the 80s. There were 2 lots of Ghostbusters. Little did a lot of people know, and little did Dan Aykroyd know, as he went through some different names and ideas, he came up with Ghost Smashers, Ghost Chasers, and Ghostbusters was an idea for a bigger corporation, instead of what we know today where it's 3 people who failed within their profession at the university for whatever reasons. So within the story ahead, there were some different problems that they faced, wanting to call Ghostbusters Ghostbusters, and then Film Nation also owned the rights because they had the 1975 show The Ghostbusters. It was more of a Scooby-Doo kind of feel, live action. It was a bit unusual, but for its time, it was popular. And the 2 guys that played in the roles for the Ghostbusters also were in the popular show F Troop. So there was some interesting history within the original Ghostbusters. However, moving forward, both parties eventually came to settling outside of court and went with different licensing agreements to what they're going to move forward with. So Ghostbusters was offered to be called Ghostbusters with the movie licensing, and obviously cartoons came into production after that, where it was popular with The Real Ghostbusters as to the Ghostbusters we know, and then seeing this other Ghostbusters was kind of confusing because it was connected as a follow-on story to the original Ghostbusters.
Foreman was right. This mine is haunted. Go ahead, son. You and Eddie dematerialize that ghost just like we taught you.
Being the Ghostbusters. So within both sides, it took 2 different directions, but the titles were confusing. Number 4, comparing deleted scenes. Confirming what I've been talking about between the original scripts and the novelisation, wow. A few deleted scenes do confirm when you look at the deleted scenes to the novelisation. You can see some of the story of what it could have been. There are other scenes that are in the novelisation that don't make it into the deleted scenes of the cutting room floor. So where does it all go wrong? It's the sexualization within the book is where it all goes wrong. It actually has a very highly sexual tone throughout the book. And I will say this, especially with the audiobook, when you're listening to certain things, you could compare it to something like a porn parody, but please don't. Please don't send me any links or references. Please don't. I'm just saying that as a bit of a side joke, because there was a lot of content that just was not appropriate for what type of story that it was. And I think some of the different humour, like with different films like Revenge of the Nerds, it has a lot of sexual content in the film that is just unnecessary. And I also like the movie Never Back Down, but the sequel movie, Never Back Down 2, yeah, I just didn't like all the sexual content, and I will say a lot of that within this channel. It grosses me out. It's also unnecessary for a flow of a good story, and it just ruins it. And with deleted scenes, there were deleted scenes that confirmed some things. Especially another point that is a bit hard, but we need to touch on it. Number 5. Same time, different place. So just like with the movie, it goes between the scenes where it's what's going on with Egon, with Lewis Tully. There is also the other part where it's more about what Winston and Ray were doing. So in the movie, you only see that little bit where they're in the car talking about Revelations. And yes, I know they got the Bible verse wrong. They did correct that within the Afterlife movie. Within the reference of what's moving forward with the Dream Ghost, I'm going to touch on it, and we're going to get through this together. Not together, just, you know what I mean, just get through this, because it is necessary to explain why the audiobook does have some creepy points. And there are heaps more, but this is the most important to touch on, because there is a little bit of something that shows that one scene in the movie, in the end product, that just does not fit. And it didn't need to be in there to be a brilliant movie.
The apparition smiled and drifted slowly toward the end of the bed. If I hold still, Stans thought, it'll go away and I can follow it. I was a fool to let down my guard. That won't happen again. He opened his eyes. The phantom woman had vanished. Well, that's the end of that, he decided, and started to rise. His belt suddenly came undone. The buttons on his pants began to open one by one. He felt an electric sensation between his legs. You know, he thought, maybe we've been going about this all wrong. Maybe some of these spirits are friendly, beneficial, fantastic. He closed his eyes. I don't think we're going to find this one, he thought. Winston had come up empty. If there was a ghost at Fort Detmering, it was a real quiet one. I wonder how Ray's doing. He came around the end of a corridor and suddenly heard voices from behind a wooden door.
Hey, Stan, you all right in there?
Later, man.
And light inside through the cracks. Ray? Hey, Stans, you okay in there? Later, man. Zeddemore shrugged. He's the boss. He must know what he's doing. He ambled off in search of a cigarette.
That was a bit for me to handle. Number 6, getting it all out there. With the references, in the beginning, even the librarian, she thinks she's seeing the ghost chasing her because she looked at the Kama Sutra. Again, more references. Then there's other parts that come forward where, yes, there's a lot of different sexual talk with Peter Venkman, and I'll touch on that in the next point, but yeah, again, he's a lot more disturbing. I actually hated the character going through the audiobook especially, because it just felt like it was something quite disturbing in my ear. And then there are other points where there are some different instances with ghosts, like with the honeymooners. There is also another scene I will also touch on very shortly, but there was another ghost. When the ghosts come out of the containment unit, it explains that there's a stripper on stage at Broadway, and it's like, come on, enough is enough. And then that's not even the worst of it. The worst of it is this other scene that comes up that was unnecessary within the story, and the reference to the ghost was a phantasm, just like the dream ghost. So I believe in some sort of way, did Ray catch the dream ghost and put her in the containment unit to escape? Because this other scene is the only ghost that references as a phantasm. Then there is also the other part. If you look at the Tobin Spirit Guide, it even confirms with the dream ghost that Ray determined that the ghost is no threat to society, but still checks on her from time to time.
In the customer payroll department of Security Atlantic Bank and Trust, most of the employees had their eyes on the clock. Just 15 minutes to lunch. From her office, the department manager noticed the situation and determined once and for all to put a stop to it. We'll see how they like staying late. She rose, walked to the doorway of the section, and cleared her throat loudly. A few of the employees looked up, guilt written on their faces. "I have something to say to you all," she began, "and this applies to more than one of you." She stopped, puzzled. Something was tickling her legs. She looked down as surreptitiously as she could, but there was nothing there. She determined to ignore it. "As I was saying, my God, there's a hand tickling my legs." She gave a yelp of surprise and slapped at the front of her dress. Someone giggled. "What's happening? It feels so..." She struggled to turn and headed for the restroom. She barely made the door. The typists and clerks looked at each other and laughed. But the phantasm was not alone. They were all late for lunch.
They were all late for lunch. My God, could it get any worse? However, there are some well-written scenes and chapters within the book. I do have to say the author did do a fantastic job to follow the direction of the film and the original scripts and other ideas, and he did write it quite well. So I will give the author credit. Just what he wrote about was not good, but I will go back to another argument earlier with the more deep, meaningful episodes of The Real Ghostbusters and Extreme Ghostbusters, especially with the family dynamics and some of the other dramas.
Did you feel it too?
Well, I don't know, sort of. I mean, you could stand to put on a couple of pounds.
Back off, Eduardo! Why? She's legal. She's a ghost!
He wrote the best episodes and the more memorable episodes of those two shows. And he also has a career in writing other books and other screenplays and other episodes for different shows. But again, I just found it hard to get through this audiobook, but I did get through it. The seventh and final point, the book, I didn't like it. I do, however, like the Ghostbusters 2 novelization. I enjoyed that one a lot more than a lot of audiobooks I've listened to. And as again, I do compare generally the book with the audiobook. It just depends. And I think there are some audiobooks that are better to go through as an audiobook than a regular book. However, on my final point, there are so many other references, and when you look at certain scenes of the movie, especially the first movie with Peter Venkman, he's not far away from an actual predator you should be worried about. So we'll just finish up with wrapping up. This is our first actual full-length video within this channel. Thank you for watching till the end. And here is a Peter Venkman montage to kind of creep you out with what the audiobook can actually be. And I will see you all next time.
Hey, what? I'll take Miss Barrett back to her apartment and check her out. I'll go check out Miss Barrett's apartment. I am madly in love with you.
Don't believe this. Will you please leave?
I'll bet you're going to be thinking about me after I'm
I
gone.
bet I am.
No kiss.
Do you think I have it, Dr. Venkman?
You're no fluke, Jennifer.
I want this body.
Is this a trick question? I just whacked her up with about 300 cc's of Thorazine. She's going to take a little nap now.